I'm 33 years old, and I can still remember the exact shade of my mother's lipstick the day she told me I was a disappointment. It was coral pink, perfectly applied, not a smudge out of place. I was 7. Victoria was 9. We were standing in the kitchen of our colonial house in Greenwich, Connecticut, and Mom was getting ready for one of her charity luncheons. Victoria had just won some spelling bee, and I'd come home with a painting I'd made in art class, a sunset over the ocean. All oranges and purples that I'd spent hours mixing. Mom took one look at it, smiled that tight smile I'd come to know so well, and said, "That's nice, Arya. Why don't you go hang it in your room?" Then she turned to Victoria, adjusted her daughter's collar, and said, "Now there's my star. Come on, sweetheart. Let's show everyone your trophy." If you're watching this, drop your city in the comments. Let's see how far this story travels. And if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, hit that like button. Trust me, you're going to want to see where this goes. Subscribe if you haven't already, because this story doesn't end the way you think it will. That's how it always was. Victoria got the spotlight, the praise, the attention. I got the leftovers. And Helena Bennett, my mother, she made sure everyone knew which daughter was worth investing in. My father, David, died when I was 12 and Victoria was 14. Heart attack at 48. Right there in his office at the investment firm he'd built from nothing. He was brilliant with numbers, kind with people, and the only person in our house who ever looked at me like I mattered. I remember the last thing he said to me. I'd brought him coffee in his study the night before he died. He was working late, like always, and he looked up from his papers, smiled, and said, "You know what, Ari? You've got something special, something real. Don't let anyone tell you different." I held on to those words like a life raft for the next 21 years. After Dad died, everything changed. Or maybe it just became more of what it already was. Mom threw herself into managing the family money and running the charitable foundation Dad had started. Victoria went to Yale, then Harvard Law. She became everything Mom wanted: polished, connected, ambitious, ruthless. She married Grayson Whitmore, a corporate attorney whose family had old money and older secrets. They lived in a penthouse in Manhattan, threw parties that got written up in society pages, and visited Mom every Sunday like clockwork. Me. I went to a state school, studied social work, moved to a small apartment in Stamford. I worked with foster kids and abuse survivors, people who'd been forgotten or thrown away. It didn't pay much, but it filled something in me that had been empty since Dad died. Mom called it wasting my potential. Victoria called it playing savior because you couldn't save yourself. I stopped going to Sunday dinners when I was 25. It was easier than sitting there, watching Mom and Victoria discuss stock portfolios and foundation galas while I pushed food around my plate. Invisible. Mom would occasionally call, usually when she needed something, a signature on some document, or someone to organize donations for one of her events. I'd do it, because I kept hoping that maybe this time she'd see me, really see me. She never did. 3 months ago, on a Tuesday morning in September, I got the call. It was Victoria, her voice strangely flat. "Mom had a stroke. She's at Greenwich Hospital. It's bad, Arya. You should come." I drove there in a daze, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Whatever complicated mess of feelings I had about Helena Bennett, she was still my mother. Some part of me, the 7-year-old with the painting, maybe still wanted her to love me. Mom was unconscious when I arrived. Victoria was already there, perfectly composed in a black Armani suit, talking to doctors about prognoses and treatment options. She barely looked at me when I walked in. "She's not waking up," Victoria said. "They're saying days, maybe a week." Mom died 4 days later. She never opened her eyes, never said goodbye, never told me she loved me. Not that I'd expected her to. You can't miss what you never had. The funeral was huge. Mom had been a fixture in Greenwich society, on the boards of half a dozen charities, always smiling for cameras and writing checks. Hundreds of people came to pay their respects. They told me how sorry they were, how wonderful Helena had been, how much she'd done for the community. I smiled and nodded and felt absolutely nothing. Victoria gave the eulogy. She was perfect, of course. Talked about Mom's legacy, her strength, her vision. how she taught Victoria to be fierce and ambitious, to never settle for less than excellence. She didn't mention me once. I sat in the second row. Victoria and Grayson had taken the first, and listened to my sister eulogize a woman who'd made my childhood a study in not being good enough. After the burial, Victoria informed me that the will reading would be in 1 week. Jonathan Pierce is handling it, she said. Dad's lawyer. Mom kept him on. We'll meet at his office. I knew Jonathan Pierce. He'd been Dad's best friend, his college roommate, the godfather of Victoria, and I had never really known because Mom had pushed him out after Dad died. He'd tried to stay in touch, sending birthday cards and Christmas presents, but Mom had made it clear his presence wasn't welcome. Something about him questioning her decisions. Eventually, the cards stopped coming. That week was surreal. I kept expecting to feel something: grief, loss, something, but mostly I just felt tired. Tired of being the daughter who wasn't enough. Tired of hoping things would change. The will reading was scheduled for 2 o'clock on a Thursday. Jonathan's office was in downtown Greenwich, in one of those old buildings with crown molding and oil paintings of dead lawyers on the walls. I wore a simple black dress. Victoria wore Chanel and diamonds. We sat on opposite sides of Jonathan's conference table and didn't speak. Jonathan Pierce walked in at exactly 2 o'clock. He was in his mid-60s now, gray-haired but sharp-eyed, wearing a suit that looked expensive but worn, like he'd had it for years and taken care of it. He looked at me first, and something passed over his face: recognition, maybe, or sadness. Then he looked at Victoria and his expression went carefully neutral. "Thank you both for coming," he said, sitting down and opening a leather folder. "I know this is difficult. I'll try to make it as straightforward as possible." Victoria leaned back in her chair, completely relaxed. She knew what was coming. Mom had probably told her years ago. Jonathan began reading. The will was exactly what I expected. The house in Greenwich went to Victoria. The apartment in Manhattan went to Victoria. The stocks, bonds, and investment portfolios worth approximately $12 million went to Victoria. The charitable foundation would continue under Victoria's direction. Even Mom's jewelry, her clothes, her personal effects, all Victoria. And then Jonathan got to my part, to my daughter Aria. He read, his voice careful. "I'll leave the sum of $10,000 to be used as she sees fit." The room was silent. $10,000 out of an estate worth well over $20 million. Victoria didn't even try to hide her smile. I should have felt something. Hurt, maybe, or anger, but honestly, I just felt confirmed. This was exactly who my mother had been. At least now it was in writing, but Jonathan wasn't finished. He looked up from the document, his eyes meeting mine. "However," he said slowly, "there is an additional provision. A codicil that Helena added to her will approximately 6 months ago." Victoria's smile faltered. Just a flicker. But I saw it. Jonathan pulled out another document. His hands were steady, but something in his eyes looked almost sad. "This codicil states that the $15 million bequest to Victoria Whitmore is conditional. It can only be distributed after certain terms are met." "What terms?" Victoria's voice was sharp now. Jonathan looked at her. "The terms state that you must provide documentation proving the legitimate origin of certain assets that were transferred into Helena's name between 2008 and 2012. Specifically, the Wellington investment accounts and the Cayman holdings." The room went very still. "What the hell are you talking about?" Victoria stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Those were Mom's investments. Her money." "No," Jonathan said quietly. "They weren't." And then he looked at me. "They were your father's. And according to his original will, the one Helena had sealed and suppressed, they were meant to be held in trust for both his daughters equally." I couldn't breathe. The room tilted. "What?" Jonathan's voice was steady now, like he'd been waiting years to say this. "David Bennett made me executor of his estate in 2003. His will stipulated that his assets were to be divided equally between his wife and daughters, with specific trusts established for Aria and Victoria. Those trusts were to be managed independently until each daughter turned 30. Victoria's face had gone white. "That's not Mom said, your mother," Jonathan continued, and now there was steel in his voice. filed a competing will 6 months after David's death. She claimed he'd changed his will shortly before he died, leaving everything to her with the understanding that she'd provide for her daughters as she saw fit. She had a document, signatures, witnesses. I tried to contest it, but she had powerful attorneys. The case was sealed. My hands were shaking. Dad left me money? He left you half of everything, Jonathan said. Approximately $8 million in trust, to be yours at 30. But Helena transferred those assets into her own name using forged documents. I've spent the last 15 years trying to prove it, and 6 months ago, I finally did. He pushed a folder across the table to me. The forensic accountant's report, the handwriting analysis, the depositions. It's all here. Your father's real will, and the proof that your mother committed fraud. Victoria lunged across the table, trying to grab the folder, but Jonathan was faster. Don't, he said quietly. It's over, Victoria. This is insane. Victoria's voice was shrill now, nothing like her usual polished control. You're making this up. You hated Mom. You always did. And now you're trying to. I have copies, Jonathan said. Multiple copies. The original documents are with the probate court. Helena knew I had them. That's why she added the codicil. She knew that when she died, the truth would come out. She thought she could control it from beyond the grave. I was crying now, silent tears streaming down my face. Dad had left me money. Dad had wanted me taken care of. And Mom had stolen it. Helena couldn't destroy what David built. Jonathan continued, his voice softer now. But she tried. She used his money to fund her lifestyle, her charities, her image. And she raised Victoria to believe it was all rightfully hers. He looked at my sister. I'm sorry, Victoria. But your mother built your life on a lie. Victoria was shaking. No. You're lying. Mom wouldn't. She didn't. She did, Jonathan said simply. And now it has to be made right. He turned back to me. The probate court has frozen all of Helena's assets pending investigation. The $15 million she left to Victoria can't be distributed until Victoria proves those funds weren't stolen, which she can't do because they were. Once the investigation is complete, those assets, plus interest, will be redistributed according to David's original will. My voice came out as a whisper. What does that mean? Jonathan smiled, and it was the first time I'd seen him smile since he walked in. It means, Arya, that you're about to inherit approximately $17 million. Everything your father meant for you to have. Everything that was always yours. Victoria screamed. Actually screamed. Or a sound of rage and disbelief. You can't do this. That money is mine. Mom left it to me. Your mother, Jonathan said, his voice hard now, stole it from your father and your sister. She committed fraud, and I have been waiting 21 years to make this right. Victoria grabbed her purse and stormed toward the door. But before she left, she turned back to me, her face twisted with fury. You did this. You put him up to this. You're pathetic, Arya. You always have been, and now you're trying to steal what's mine. It was never yours, I said. My voice was steady now, stronger than I'd ever heard it. It was Dad's, and he wanted me to have it. Victoria slammed the door so hard the oil paintings rattled on the walls. I sat there in the silence, staring at the folder in front of me. Jonathan was watching me carefully. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I'm sorry I couldn't do this sooner. I tried, Arya. I tried so many times. But Helena was very good at protecting herself. Why now? I asked. Why did she add the codicil? Jonathan sighed. 6 months ago, she found out about my investigation. She knew I had proof. She could have destroyed me, taken everything I had in legal fees. But I think he paused. I think some part of her knew she'd gone too far. The codicil was her way of admitting it without admitting it. She couldn't bring herself to change the will entirely, to give you what you were owed. But she could make it impossible for Victoria to claim the money without exposing what she'd done. So even at the end, I said slowly, she couldn't just do the right thing. No, Jonathan agreed. But she couldn't keep doing the wrong thing either. It was the closest Helena Bennett could get to a conscience. I opened the folder. Inside were bank statements, legal documents, reports. Years of my father's work and planning. Years of my mother's deception. And at the very back, A copy of my father's original will. I saw his signature at the bottom, bold and clear, and above it, his handwriting on a note attached to the document. For my girls. Make sure they know how much I love them. Both of them. I broke down then. Sobbed right there in Jonathan's office. 21 years of grief and abandonment and not being good enough pouring out of me. Jonathan didn't say anything. He just pushed a box of tissues across the table and waited. When I finally could breathe again, I looked up at him. What happens now? Now, he said, we file the paperwork. The court will review the evidence. It'll take a few months, but the outcome isn't in doubt. The fraud is too clear. Helena's assets will be redistributed according to David's original will, and Victoria. Jonathan's face was grim. Victoria will likely inherit whatever assets can be proven to have originated with Helena herself, some jewelry, some personal effects, maybe a few $100,000 in accounts that predate your father's death. But the bulk of the estate, including the house, the investments, the foundation, that all came from David, and it should have been divided equally. I couldn't process it. $17 million. My father's love, preserved in bank accounts and investment portfolios, waiting for me all these years. There's something else, Jonathan said. He reached into the folder and pulled out an envelope. David left this for you. He asked me to give it to you when you turned 30. Helena never knew about it. I've been holding onto it for 3 years, waiting for the right moment. My hands shook as I took the envelope. It was sealed, yellowed with age. My name was written on the front in Dad's handwriting. I'll give you some privacy, Jonathan said. And he left the room. I sat there alone in that conference room, surrounded by law books and the ghosts of my family, and opened my father's letter. My dearest Aria, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I hope I got to see you grow up. I hope I got to tell you how proud I am of you. I know things with your mother are complicated. They've always been complicated. Helena loves you, in her way, but she loves the idea of perfection more. She sees Victoria as an extension of herself, something she can mold and polish and show to the world. But you, Ari, you've always been your own person. Creative, compassionate, real. That scares her. I want you to know that you were never the problem. You were never not enough. You were always exactly who you were supposed to be. I've made sure you'll be taken care of financially. Jonathan has the details. But more than money, I want to give you permission. Permission to live your own life. To make your own choices. To be exactly who you are without apologizing for it. Don't let anyone, not your mother, not your sister, not anyone tell you you're worth less than you are. Don't let them make you small. I love you, Ari. I'm so proud of you. I always will be. Dottie read it 3 times. Then I folded it carefully, put it back in the envelope, and held it against my chest. My father had seen me. Really seen me. And he'd tried to protect me, even knowing he might not be there to do it himself. I walked out of Jonathan's office into the late afternoon sun. My phone was already buzzing texts from Victoria, angry and desperate. I turned it off. Whatever she had to say, I didn't need to hear it. I drove back to my apartment in Stamford, that tiny 1-bedroom with the leaky faucet and the view of the parking lot. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, I just wanted to sit with what I'd learned. My father had loved me, had wanted me taken care of, had known somehow that I'd need that proof someday. My mother had stolen from me, had built her perfect life on a lie, had let me believe for decades that I was the problem. And Victoria had been raised to think she deserved everything, never knowing it was founded on fraud. I should have felt victorious, vindicated, but mostly I just felt sad. Sad for the family we could have been. Sad for the mother who couldn't love me the way I needed. Sad for the sister who'd been taught to value herself at my expense. But underneath the sadness, something else was growing. Something small and bright and unfamiliar. Hope. For the first time in my life, I had the resources to do whatever I wanted. To help people. To build something real. To live without constantly justifying my existence. I had my father's love. In black and white, I had the truth. And I had $17 million to prove that I'd been worth something all along. The next 3 months were a blur of lawyers, accountants, and paperwork. Jonathan handled most of it, shielding me from the worst of the legal storm. Victoria hired 3 different attorneys, each more aggressive than the last, trying to contest the forensic evidence. It didn't matter. The truth was airtight. My mother had forged documents, falsified signatures, and transferred millions of dollars that weren't hers to transfer. The court froze everything. The Greenwich house, the Manhattan apartment, the investment accounts, even the charitable foundation Mom had used as her personal stage for benevolence, all of it locked down pending the investigation. Victoria called me once, 2 weeks after the will reading. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "You're destroying everything," she said. Her voice was shaking, but whether from anger or fear, I couldn't tell. "Everything Mom built, everything we are, everything Mom stole," I corrected quietly. "You're ruining me, Arya. Grayson's firm is asking questions. The foundation board is threatening to resign. Do you know what this is doing to my reputation?" I wanted to feel sorry for her. Part of me did. But a larger part, the part that had spent 33 years being invisible, didn't. "Your reputation was built on money that wasn't yours, Victoria. Dad's money. My money. Dad would have wanted Mom to have it," she insisted. "He would have wanted her to be taken care of. Dad left a will," I said. "A real one. He made his wishes clear. Mom chose to ignore them because she knew better. She knew how to manage money, how to invest, how to build. She knew how to steal," I said. "And she taught you to think that was normal." Victoria was silent for a long moment. Then, "I'll never forgive you for this." "I know," I said. And I hung up. The investigation concluded in December. The judge's ruling was damning. Helena Bennett had committed extensive and deliberate fraud in order to misappropriate funds intended for her minor daughter. The original will was reinstated. Dad's estate would be redistributed according to his wishes. I sat in Jonathan's office again, this time with a team of financial advisors, and listened to them explain what I'd inherited. After accounting for 21 years of growth and interest, Dad's trust for me was now worth just over $19 million. Victoria would receive approximately $3 million, everything that could be proven to be genuinely my mother's, plus a small settlement to avoid further litigation. The house in Greenwich would be sold. The proceeds split between us. The foundation would be dissolved and its remaining assets distributed to legitimate charities. Victoria didn't attend any of the court proceedings. She sent her lawyers. I heard through Jonathan that she and Grayson were moving to Boston, starting over, away from the Connecticut social circles that were now full of whispers about the Bennett family scandal. I thought I'd feel satisfaction when the ruling came down. Instead, I felt hollow. We'd both lost our mother. I'd just lost her a long time before she died. The money hit my account on a cold morning in January. I woke up, checked my phone out of habit, and saw the notification from my bank. Balance, 19,247,583.42. I stared at it for 10 minutes, waiting to feel different. Waiting to feel like this changed who I was. It didn't. I was still me. Still the woman who worked with foster kids and lived in a 1-bedroom apartment. The woman my mother had never thought was good enough. But now I had choices. I called a meeting with the financial advisors Jonathan had connected me with. Smart people, trustworthy people, the kind Dad would have approved of. We talked about investments, about growth, about security. They suggested putting most of it into diversified portfolios, living off the interest, ensuring I'd never have to worry about money again. I agreed to about half of that. The other half, I had different plans for. I started a foundation. Not like Mom's, no galas, no society pages, no photo ops. A real foundation, focused on foster care reform and support for abuse survivors. I hired social workers, therapists, legal advocates. We opened safe houses. We funded education programs. We paid for trauma therapy. Everything I'd wanted to do for years but never had the resources for. I named it the David Bennett Foundation for Children and Families. Dad would have liked that. I also bought a house. Not in Greenwich, I never wanted to go back there, but in a quiet neighborhood in Norwalk. 3 bedrooms, a backyard, nothing fancy. A place that felt like mine, not like a trophy or a showpiece. A place where I could breathe. And I kept my job. My boss thought I was crazy when I told her I was staying. even after inheriting millions. But the work mattered. The kids mattered. I wasn't going to walk away from that just because I didn't need the paycheck anymore. 3 months after the money came through, Jonathan called. The Greenwich house sold, he said. Your half of the proceeds will be transferred next week. But there's something you should know. What? Victoria's portion is being seized to cover debts. Apparently, she and Grayson had been living well beyond their means for years. Credit cards, loans, mortgages on properties they've already lost, without the inheritance they'd been counting on. They're broke, I said, essentially. Yes. I should have felt vindicated. This was karma, wasn't it? Justice for all those years of being overlooked and undervalued. But I just felt tired. Jonathan, I said slowly, can you set up a trust for Victoria? Anonymous. Enough to cover her basic expenses, education if she wants to go back to school, but nothing extravagant. She won't know it's from me. There was a long silence on the other end. Arya, after everything she didn't do it, I said. Mom did. Victoria was just raised to think she deserved the rewards. She was a victim too, in her way. A different kind, but still, that's very generous. It's not generous, I said. It's just, I don't want to be the person who watches her suffer. I don't want her to have that power over me anymore. Jonathan set it up. A modest trust, enough for Victoria to live on if she was careful, to rebuild if she wanted to. She'd never know it came from me, and I preferred it that way. I didn't want her gratitude or her apology. I just wanted to be done carrying the weight of our family's dysfunction. Spring came. The foundation was thriving. We'd helped over 200 kids in the first 6 months, provided support for dozens of families, funded 3 new shelters. I was busier than I'd ever been, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was doing something that mattered. Something Dad would have been proud of. One Saturday in April, I was at the Foundation's main office, a renovated building in Bridgeport that used to be a school, when one of our social workers came to find me. Arya, there's someone here to see you. I looked up from the grant proposal I'd been reviewing. Who? She hesitated. She says she's your sister. My stomach dropped. Tell her I'm busy. I did. She said she'll wait. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the papers in front of me. Then I stood up. Fine. Conference room B. Victoria was standing by the window when I walked in. She looked different, thinner. Her hair was shorter, styled simply instead of the elaborate salon blowouts she used to favor. She was wearing jeans and a sweater, expensive brands probably, but nothing flashy. She looked older than 36. Worn out. What do you want, Victoria? She turned to face me. Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I crossed my arms. Okay. I mean it, she said. I was wrong about everything. I was cruel to you, and I'm sorry. You learned from the best, I said. She flinched. I know I did. But I'm trying to do better now. Therapy, actually twice a week. I'm working through a lot of stuff about Mom, about how I was raised, about what I thought I was entitled to. Good for you. Arya, please. Her voice broke. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I know I don't deserve that. But I wanted you to know that I'm trying. I got a job teaching assistant at a charter school in Boston. It's nothing glamorous, but I like it. I'm helping kids, learning how to be, I don't know, useful, real. I studied her face, looking for manipulation, for the angles I'd learned to watch for. But all I saw was exhaustion and something that looked like genuine remorse. Why are you really here? I asked. Victoria took a breath. Because I found out about the trust. The anonymous one. It took me a while to figure out it was you, but I hired an investigator and it's you, isn't it? I didn't answer. Why would you do that? She asked. After everything I did to you, everything I said, because you're still my sister, I said quietly. And because I'm not Mom. Victoria's face crumpled. She sat down hard in one of the conference room chairs and started crying deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from somewhere ancient. I stood there, watching her, feeling that familiar tug of wanting to comfort her and wanting to protect myself from her at the same time. Finally, I sat down across from her. I didn't touch her, didn't offer tissues or platitudes. I just waited. When she could speak again, She looked at me with swollen eyes. I was so jealous of you, she said. My whole life. You had something I didn't, something real. Mom could never touch it. You were yourself, even when she hated you for it. And I was just her puppet, her perfect little doll. You had choices, I said. It wasn't mean, just factual. I know. I made the wrong ones. I was scared of losing her approval, scared of not being special anymore. And I took it out on you. She wiped her eyes. You deserved better. You deserved all of it, Dad's money, Mom's love, everything. You were always a better person. I don't want to be the better person, I said. I just want to be my own person. Victoria laughed. A broken sound. You always were. That's what made Mom so crazy. We sat in silence for a while. Outside the window, kids were playing in the courtyard, some of the children from our temporary housing program. Their laughter drifted through the glass. This place is amazing, Victoria said, looking around. What you've built. Dad would be so proud. I hope so. I know so. She stood up, shouldering her purse. I should go. I just wanted to say thank you. And I'm sorry. And if you ever want to talk, or, I don't know, I'm here. No expectations. I walked her to the door. Before she left, I said, Victoria. She turned back. Good luck with the teaching, I said. I hope you find what you're looking for. Her smile was sad but genuine. You too, Aria, even though I think you already have. I watched her walk to her car, a used Honda, not the Mercedes she used to drive, and felt something shift in my chest. Not forgiveness exactly, not yet, but maybe the beginning of letting go. That night, I went home to my house in Norwalk and sat in the backyard with a glass of wine. The air smelled like spring earth and new growth and possibility. I thought about my father, about the letter he'd written me, about how he'd known I'd need his protection even after he was gone. I thought about my mother, about the choices she'd made and the pain she'd caused, about how fear and insecurity could turn a person into something small and cruel. I thought about Victoria, trying to build something real out of the ruins of her perfect life, and I thought about myself, about the little girl with the painting, who just wanted her mother to look at her and see something worth loving. I pulled out my phone and opened my photos. There, saved from years ago, was a picture of that painting, the sunset over the ocean, all oranges and purples. I'd kept it all these years, moved it from apartment to apartment, hung it in my bedroom where no one else would see it. It was good. Not perfect, but honest, real. The work of a child who saw beauty and tried to capture it, without worrying about whether it was good enough for anyone else. I smiled. And for the first time in a long time, it didn't hurt to remember. 6 months later, I was at the foundation when Jonathan called. Aria, I need you to come to my office. There's something you need to see. Can it wait? We're interviewing candidates for the new education director position. No, he said, and something in his voice made me stop. It can't wait. I drove to Greenwich, that familiar route I'd traveled so many times as a child. Jonathan's office looked the same oil paintings, same heavy furniture. But when I walked into his conference room, there was a banker's box on the table. What's this? I asked. Jonathan looked older than he had at the will reading. Tired. After Helena died, I was granted access to her safe deposit box as executor. This wasn't it. I've been trying to decide whether to show you, but I think you have a right to know. He opened the box. Inside were letters, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, still in their envelopes, all addressed to me. All in my father's handwriting. My hands shook as I reached for the first one. The postmark was from 2004, 6 months after Dad died. It was addressed to me at our Greenwich house. She kept them, I whispered. Mom kept them all. Jonathan's face was grim. Your father wrote to you every month for a year after his death. He'd prepared them before he died, to be mailed to you. Birthday cards, Christmas cards, just regular letters. He wanted you to know he was thinking of you, even after he was gone, but I never got them. My voice sounded strange, distant. Helena intercepted them all, destroyed the envelopes, saved the letters. I don't know why. Maybe she couldn't bring herself to destroy his words entirely, or maybe she wanted to keep control of his memory, but she made sure you never saw them. I opened the first letter with shaking hands. Dear Ari, you're 13 now. probably dealing with all the complicated stuff that comes with being a teenager. I wish I could be there to help you through it. I want you to know something. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be like anyone else. The world is going to try to tell you who you should be, how you should act, what you should want. Don't listen. Be kind. Be brave. Be yourself. That's all that matters. I love you, sweetheart. Every single day. Dottie couldn't see through my tears. Jonathan quietly left the room, closing the door behind him. I spent the next 3 hours reading every single letter. 13 birthday letters, 13 Christmas letters, and 12 monthly letters, one for each month of the year after his death. Each one full of advice, encouragement, love, each one telling me I was enough. I was worthy. I was loved. My father had tried to reach me from beyond the grave, had tried to give me the love and support he knew I'd need. And my mother had stolen that too. The anger came then. Real, hot, burning anger. Not the sad resignation I'd felt before, but genuine fury. It wasn't enough for her to steal his money. She had to steal his words too, his love. The one thing that might have made those years bearable. I called Victoria. She answered on the third ring. Arya, is everything okay? Did you know? My voice was harsh. About the letters? Silence. Then, what letters? Dad wrote to me. For a whole year after he died. Letters, cards, messages. Mom kept them all. Hid them from me. Did you? No. No, Victoria's voice was small. I swear, Arya. I didn't know. She never said anything about letters. I believed her. I don't know why. But I did. There are dozens of them. A whole year of Dad trying to tell me he loved me. And she kept them locked away for 20 years. Victoria was crying now. I could hear it in her breathing. I'm so sorry. God, Arya, I'm so sorry. She was so much worse than I ever realized. Yeah, I said. She was. After I hung up, I sat with those letters for a long time. Then I carefully put them back in the box, all except one. The last one Dad had written, dated exactly 1 year after his death. My dearest Arya, this is my last letter to you. I've said everything I can say, given you all the advice I have to give. Now you have to live your own life, make your own choices, find your own way. But I want you to know this. You were my joy. Every single day I got to be your father was a gift. Watching you grow, seeing your creativity and compassion and strength, it was the best thing I ever did. Don't let anyone dim your light. Not your mother, not your sister, not anyone. You have something special, something real. Hold on to it. I'll always be proud of you. Always be with you. Always love you. Be happy, Ari. That's all I ever wanted for you. All my love. Dottie had that letter framed. It hangs in my office at the foundation now, where I can see it every day. The rest of the letters I locked away in my own safe deposit box. Someday I'd read them again. But not yet. They hurt too much. Knowing what could have been different if I'd gotten them when I was supposed to. A year after the will reading, the foundation hosted its first annual gala. I'd resisted the idea at first, too much like Mom's society events, all performance and no substance. But my board convinced me it would help with fundraising. And they were right. The night of the event, I stood in the hotel ballroom watching donors and supporters mill around, looking at the displays we'd set up showing the foundation's work. Photos of kids we'd helped, families we'd supported, lives we'd changed. I was wearing a simple navy dress, nothing flashy. I'd learned that I didn't need to prove anything with clothes or jewelry or any of the other armor my mother and sister had always used. Miss Bennett? One of our volunteers approached me. There's someone asking for you at the registration table. She says she's family. My stomach clenched. Victoria and I had been in sporadic contact over the past year, careful texts, occasional phone calls, slowly rebuilding something that might eventually resemble a sisterly relationship. But I hadn't invited her to this. Hadn't wanted to mix my new life with the complicated mess of my old one. But when I got to the registration table, it wasn't Victoria. It was a woman I'd never seen before. She was maybe 60, with gray hair and kind eyes, wearing a modest dress. She smiled when she saw me. Arya Bennett? Yes? I'm Margaret Pierce, Jonathan's wife. I blinked. I didn't know Jonathan was married. We reconciled about a year ago, she said. We'd been separated for a long time, but life is short, and we decided we'd wasted enough of it. She glanced around the ballroom. Jonathan told me about what you're doing here, about your father and your mother and everything that happened. I wanted to meet you. Oh, I said, not sure what else to say. Margaret leaned in slightly, her voice dropping. I knew your father. Jonathan and I used to have dinner with your parents back before David died. He was a wonderful man, and he talked about you constantly. How creative you were, how kind. He was so proud of you. My throat tightened. Thank you. Your mother, Margaret continued carefully, was a complicated woman, brilliant in some ways, but deeply insecure. I think she saw you as a threat. A threat? You were real, Margaret said simply. Genuine. Everything she wasn't. And she couldn't control you the way she controlled Victoria. That terrified her. I'd never thought of it that way. I'd always assumed Mom just didn't love me, that something in me was fundamentally unlovable. But maybe it was never about me at all. Maybe it was always about her. I'm glad you found your way, Margaret said, touching my arm lightly. I'm glad you're doing this work. Your father would be thrilled. She melted back into the crowd, leaving me standing there with tears in my eyes and a strange sense of peace settling over me. The gala raised over $800,000. We funded 3 new programs and expanded our reach to serve more families. And I realized, standing on that stage giving my closing remarks, that I'd finally found what I'd been looking for my whole life. Not my mother's approval, not Victoria's acceptance, not even my father's love, though that had sustained me. I'd found myself, the person I was always meant to be, underneath all the years of being told I wasn't enough. 2 years after Mom died, Victoria invited me to lunch. We met at a small cafe in Stamford, neutral territory. She looked good, healthy, settled. She was still teaching, had gotten promoted to lead teacher at her charter school. I'm getting divorced, she said after we ordered. Grayson and I, it's amicable. We realized we got married for all the wrong reasons. Status, image, what our families wanted. We don't actually love each other. I'm sorry, I said. Don't be. She smiled. And it was genuine. It's the best decision I've ever made. I'm moving back to Connecticut, actually. I got a job at a public school in New Haven. Better pay, better benefits, and I can be closer to, well, to you. If that's okay. It's okay, I said. We ate in comfortable silence for a while. Then Victoria said, I went to therapy again last week. Dr. Ramirez asked me to write a letter to Mom. Not to send, just to get it all out. What did you write? Victoria looked out the window, her expression distant. I told her I forgave her, not because she deserved it, but because I was tired of being angry. I told her I understood that she did her best with what she had, even though her best was pretty terrible. And I told her I was sorry for becoming what she made me. That's brave, I said. No. Victoria shook her head. You're brave. I'm just trying to catch up. She reached across the table and took my hand. Thank you for not giving up on me, for the trust, for answering my calls, for letting me try to be your sister again. You didn't have to do any of that. Yeah, I did, I said, because that's who I am, and I finally like who I am. Victoria squeezed my hand. Dad would be so proud of you. He'd be proud of both of us, I said, for finally figuring it out. On the 3rd anniversary of Mom's death, I did something I'd been putting off. I went to the cemetery where she and Dad were buried. I hadn't been back since the funeral. Dad's headstone was simple. David Michael Bennett, 1964 to 2012, beloved father and friend. I'd had that put on it after the estate was settled, replacing the one Mom had chosen that just listed dates. Mom's was right next to it. Helena Catherine Bennett, 1966 to 2024, devoted mother and philanthropist. I stared at those words for a long time. Devoted mother. She'd been devoted to Victoria, I supposed, to the image of motherhood, but never to me. I knelt down and brushed some leaves off Dad's headstone. Hey Dad, sorry it took me so long to visit. I've been busy, but I think you'd like what I've been doing. The foundation is thriving. We've helped over 1,000 kids now. changed lives, saved some. It's good work, important work. The wind rustled through the trees. I found your letters, the ones Mom kept from me. I wish I'd gotten them when you sent them, but I have them now. And they helped. They really helped. I took a breath. Victoria's doing better. We're not close. Not like some sisters are. But we're trying. I think we might actually be friends someday. Then I turned to Mom's grave. I'd been dreading this part. I don't know what to say to you, I admitted. I'm still angry. I might always be angry about what you did, what you took from me. But I'm also grateful, in a weird way, because you forced me to become strong, to build my own life, on my own terms, without needing your approval. I stood up, brushing dirt from my knees. I hope you're at peace. I hope you found whatever it was you were looking for. I forgive you, Mom, not because you earned it, but because I don't want to carry you around anymore. I'm done letting you take up space in my heart. As I walked back to my car, I felt lighter, like I'd set down a weight I'd been carrying so long I'd forgotten it was there. 5 years after the will reading, I was at the foundation when one of our social workers brought a girl to meet me. She was maybe 14, skinny and guarded, with hair that needed brushing and eyes that had seen too much. This is Mia, the social worker said. She just came into the system. Her mom's in rehab. Dad's not in the picture. She's staying at the shelter until we can find her a foster placement. Mia looked at me with those two old eyes and said, "You're the lady who runs this place?" "I am. They said you help kids." "I try." She chewed her lip. "Can you help me?" I saw myself in her face. That desperate need to be seen, to be helped, to matter to someone. "Yeah," I said. "I can help you." And I did. We got Mia into a good foster home, helped her mom through rehab, provided family therapy. A year later, Mia's mom had gotten her life together enough to regain custody. They weren't perfect, but they were trying. And Mia came back to volunteer at the foundation, helping other kids the way we'd helped her. "You saved my life," she told me once. "No," I said. "You saved your own life. I just gave you the tools." But watching her work with the other kids, seeing her confidence and strength, I thought about my father, about how he'd tried to give me tools to love, support, financial security, how he'd believed in me even when no one else did. I'd taken those tools and built something real, something that mattered, something my mother could never take away. Today, 7 years after that will reading, I'm sitting in my office at the David Bennett Foundation. We've helped over 5,000 children and their families. We've opened 12 facilities across Connecticut. We've changed laws, influenced policy, made the system better for kids who have no one else fighting for them. Victoria is the foundation's director of education. She took a pay cut to join us, left her teaching job to help build curricula for our programs. We work together well, which still surprises me sometimes. We're not the sisters we might have been if we'd grown up differently. But we're something. We're enough. Jonathan retired last year, but he still volunteers as our legal advisor. Margaret comes to all our events. They're like the family I never had chosen, not blood. I never remarried. Never had kids of my own. The foundation is my legacy. These kids are my purpose. And that's enough too. Sometimes late at night, I think about my mother, about what she must have felt, knowing she was dying, knowing the truth would come out. I wonder if she regretted it. I wonder if she ever loved me at all, in her own broken way. I'll never know. And I've made peace with that. Because here's what I've learned. You don't need your mother's love to be worthy of love. You don't need anyone's permission to be yourself. You don't need inheritance or money or status to have value. You just need to decide who you want to be, and then have the courage to become it. My father gave me that courage, even after he was gone. And I've spent every day since trying to pass it on to someone else who needs it. The girl with the painting grew up. She stopped waiting for her mother to see her, and she became someone worth seeing. If this story touched you, please like and subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, you are enough. You always were. Drop your city in the comments. Let's see how far this message of healing and self-worth can travel. And if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, know that I see you. Your story matters. You matter. Thank you for letting me share mine.